So our first speaker for this session, or this portion of the session, is Vince Mitchell of Lamor Corporation based in Washington. Mr. Mitchell is currently consulting to the Lamor Group, but prior to that, he was Executive Vice President with the Lamor Corporation. Vince has a global range and substantial operational and technical oil spill expertise and experience spanning over 30 years, leading many teams and projects for both routine and emergency response operations. Vince also has extensive marine experience and currently holds a U.S. master's license. And today he'll be discussing active skimmers for challenging response situations. So Vince, you're all up and your presentation's loaded, so go right ahead.
All right, Lindsay, thanks. Thanks for that great introduction. And I don't know if I should thank you for scheduling me in after lunch, but we'll go ahead and we'll get started. What I'd like to spend a few minutes on today is talking about active skimmers for challenging response situations. And when we look at active skimmers, an active skimmer really is something that uses some method to reposition, relocate the skimmer, and that's integrated into the operation of the skimmer itself. And what that might allow us to do is reposition a skimmer or move a skimmer for greater efficiency, or possibly to avoid some environmental hazards that we might encounter, such as ice or debris. So you might think of active skimmers like this, with thrusters fitted on the underwater portion of the skimmer to allow it to be repositioned, or for example, a rope mop. Rope mop uses a crane to reposition, and that's integrated into the operation of the skimmer. When we look at mechanical recovery tactics, we look at open water where we can use long lengths of deflection boom to concentrate oil to a collection point. As in this example, ice starts to build, the lengths of deflection boom would need to be removed, and using shorter lengths of boom. As the ice increases, we're going to be looking at pocket collection of oil where it's trapped against the ice. And then finally, if we're looking at broken or solid ice, we need additional technologies to address recovery in those conditions. And so we're going to focus on ice conditions because that presents some of the most challenging recovery, mechanical recovery conditions we might experience. So equipment for recovery in the ice is ideally very robust, simple, so few things go wrong. And the best skimmers for ice are active skimmers. They're able to avoid or possibly process ice that might be encountered, and they can be relocated when needed. So here's an example of some pocket oil collection. A skimmer, a brush bucket skimmer attached to a crane, and the vessel can be maneuvered and the skimmer can be repositioned in the area of thickest oil. Looking at the Lamor recovery bucket, it can be supplied in a number of sizes, small, medium, and large for lack of better terms, and ideally suited for pocket collection of oil. So here they are testing a unit on the shore side, and you can see the oleophilic skimming surface rotating. It's also equipped with a scoop bucket so that it can handle debris, move it out of the way, but also recover any viscous mats of oil. It's fitted with a feed screw that feeds the recovered oil into the transfer pump. Okay, all right, so, but you can see the video. Okay, well, that's success. So again, the brush bucket skimmer in operation. It's in addition to the oleophilic skimming surface, it has a bucket that can be used to recover heavier viscous material or transfer ice and debris. A feed screw that feeds the recovered oil to the transfer pump. Very good for pocket collection of oil and ice. So this particular skimmer was participated in the Bessie Oil and Ice Month in 2003. And it was under the realization that recovery in oil and ice presented some unique challenges. And they were looking to test a number of off-the-shelf skimmers for potential improvements and to improve recovery in these difficult conditions. So we participated with 2 skimmers. The brush bucket was one. And during the testing, they tested in 30% and 70% ice. The oil thickness was 1 inch. They did some diminishing slick testing as well. But the results were quite good. In fact, they were the best of any of the 10 skimmers that were tested. Is this one showing, Lindsay?
This one is showing.
Okay, good. Just a compilation of the testing, and you'll notice that, well, when an oleophilic surface is touching up against the ice, it's not recovering any oil. So this active skimmer is quite good to reposition when needed, or can remain stationary as it is in this case here when there's sufficient oil to be recovered. And that black line across the brushes was just a marker so they could capture the RPM. These can be mounted on existing vessel cranes, or can be supplied complete with a crane itself. Also in 2013, we participated in the U.S. Coast Guard Research and Development Demonstration Project in the Great Lakes. We brought a brush bucket skimmer, and this installation was basically from bringing a barge alongside, and we were able to swing a small skid and the power pack and get everything all set up to go in about 4 hours. And you can see some of the installations here. And that, in this case, it was a barge, and they had a recovery tank was mounted aft on the barge. And here, the area in the upper left was in the Straits of Mackinac, and then just a few photos of the installation, and then on site doing recovery with some simulated oil. Another project that was done in 2017 in the U.S. Great Lakes, we had a delivery of two of these brush bucket skimmers for bucket recovery in ice. And in this case, you can see on the upper right, they were prefabricated mounts for the crane and power pack. And then all we did was attach the skimming unit itself. The Finnish Environmental Institute, SUKE, we're working on this problem of recovering oil and ice, and they came up with this oil brush collector. And here's a few shots of their prototype, and then actually what they ended up developing. I'll show just a very short video clip of an exercise in Kemi, Finland. Lindsay, is that one showing?
Not yet.
Okay.
You may have to click on that window again.
Yeah.
There it is.
Should be now. Yeah, you can see where they're using this technology off the stern of an ice breaking vessel. And then also notice they're using the wash from the propellers. And we'll just talk about that in another couple of slides.
He just exited out of share screen. Perfect.
Okay. So at the same time, Lamor, we were developing what we call the Sternmax. And we kind of took a little different approach, had some different features. It was an A-frame to be mounted on the stern of an icebreaker, a grating around the skimming surface itself, tremendous heating capability. And we had designed it so it wouldn't inhibit the regular normal functions of the vessel. So a few shots of the Sternmax skimmer. The upper left was a prototype testing. The lower left is mounted on a Russian supply vessel. The lower right is on a Finnish ice breaking vessel. And so we took the approach of an isolation grating to block ice from impacting the skimming surface. We also have the ability to tilt and dump ice out of that area as well. Tremendous heating capability and pumping capability.
It's on.
Has the ability to break through over 1 meter of ice. And of course, when you do break through ice, as is being done here, the water and oil will rush in towards the skimming surface. You can see that the grating is different size so that any ice that is allowed into the isolation screen can exit out in addition to being dumped out. During 2015 to 2017, a project was funded to test recovery in ice. And so some trials were done. In 2016, some dye was placed under the ice and allowed to be drawn into the skimming system, the Sternmax, using the vessel thrusters. And so here's a few photos from that test. I don't know what the guy on the bottom photo did to have to be sent out on the ice by himself, but just a few shots of the test. And what was found was that using the thrusters at 10 to 20% was optimum to draw the oil to the skimmer itself, to the Sternmax. Since then, we've developed a smaller Sternmax that can be mounted on a vessel crane, or it can be supplied with the crane for smaller vessels. The same technology, the same grating, handle the same ice thicknesses, single operator, and can be deployed off the stern of the vessel. A couple of case studies I'll just very briefly go through. The one was the Runner 4 that sank after a collision in the Baltic Sea. There was Estonian and Finnish response vessels responded, and they estimate 15,000 or 18,000 liters of oil was spilled, with 15,000 liters recovered by brush bucket collection. In Kuwait, there was a kind of a combination of the first Gulf War and just sloppy handling of oil. There was 27 large oil lakes that needed to be recovered. And with this brush bucket technology, we recovered 350 tons over a couple of year process. And this was accomplished by heating the oil and then pumping it back into the collection surface.
And sorry to cut you short, but if you could wrap up with closing remarks so we have time for questions.
Yep, I have just a couple slides. So each spill we know presents different sets of circumstances that need to be considered as part of a response. And remember, it's much easier to prevent the spill than respond and clean them up. That takes teamwork by everybody. And I'll take a few questions.
Wonderful, thanks. Jenna, are there any questions?
Yeah, we have a question from James Mitchell. Is skimming in brash ice really economical compared to in situ burning?
Well, that's a good question. You may not be able to just look solely at the economics. You may have conditions where maybe permitting or other considerations, you might not be allowed to conduct in situ burning. So I think mechanical containment and response is going to be a response option in ice, and that's going to remain. There are alternate methods, of course, in situ burning and dispersant applications. In situ burning, particularly with herders, there's been some work on that in recent years. Those are all viable options, but there may be times when you cannot use those options, that you will not be allowed to use that.
All right, that concludes all of the questions.
I have a quick question for you, Vince. How many vessels are already outfitted with this skimmer?
With the Sternmax?
Yeah.
I believe it's 3 or possibly 4. I think we may have done another installation, so I'm going to say 3 or 4.
Great. Thanks so much, Vince. Appreciate your time.
Okay. Thank you.